So there are two main types when it comes to the next generation EU funds. One is the React EU, and the second one is the Recovery and Resilience. So I'm not going to go much into detail, just very briefly to explain the logic behind each one of them. So for the React EU, the purpose of this fund is to support countries within the EU to address the extraordinary expenses caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. These may include any health, economic and social measures as well. Education should be mentioned, that were put in place to respond to the pandemic. The second set of funds which are funded within the next generation are the recovery and resilience ones. And the aim of these funds is to project the European economy into the future through a green, digital, resilient and equal opportunities economy. In order to access these funds, national governments have had to submit their national recovery and resilience plans. At ESN, we already did an assessment of these plans in 20 countries. Actually, 2 of the EU countries have not yet submitted their plans to this date. You can find our assessment available within our website with the title Anchoring Social Services Recovery in Post-COVID National Reform Plans. The initial assessment, however, suggests that there are very few countries that have a specific policy strand financing social services within their plans. Now, when we look at the distribution of this recovery and resilience funds, this is done by country based on their actual national resilience plans. The resilience plans have a number of key objectives and policies along broad axes, mostly digital and green, since, as has been highlighted before, most countries do not include a specific social services focus. However, funds for employment, for support for the homeless, for people with disabilities, for long-term care may be distributed across a number of areas, a number of axes, whether it's labor market reforms, housing, health, or education. It is therefore important that you know very well your plan and who to turn to in your own country. Now, this is what you can see on the screen, is an example of how one of these national plans can be structured. As you can see on your screen here, the 4 axes around which the plan has been structured include the 2 transitions, the digital and the green, which have been established as priorities by the EU, as well as 2 more on gender equality and on social and territorial cohesion. Well, before continuing on to the next funding strands, and since we've got Anne with us, I'd like to ask you, Anne, what are the priorities for reform that you see within social services in the City of Ghent at this particular moment?
Well, we have a lot of issues that we want to tackle at the City of Ghent, so I'm not going to give an exhaustive overview, but I can give you a few ideas we are currently looking into where we think that the EU funding could definitely have an added value. With the City of Ghent's Employment and Activation Unit, we are currently looking into a partnership with the ESF Flanders Secretariat and other key actors in Flanders to work on employment issues and activation of the most vulnerable groups there, so the ones with complex situations. And that is financed by the EU Next Generation extra funding. On child poverty, we have various challenges as well. For instance, access to healthy meals at schools, and that we link to research on their well-being and also on attention in schools. Access of children from families living in transit areas and how they can access education, which is often complicated with a lot of legal restrictions, so that's something we are looking into as well. We are exploring on digital tools and how they can help poor people to simplify the bills they have to pay, and also to simplify the rights that they are entitled to but often unaware of. Also, we are looking into digital innovations in the healthcare services and also to contribute to healthy lifestyles. We are experimenting with local city currencies to stimulate the participation of citizens and to help neighbors of more vulnerable groups in that way. And there we share the best practices with other cities across Europe. And we are exploring new financing schemes and social enterprise models to overcome the shortage in the social housing markets, and especially for the vulnerable groups there, especially the homeless people who often don't have access to the social housing. So these are just some of the ideas that we currently think that the EU funding could have an added value, and where we exploring the options and also looking for partners there.
So what type of interventions do you think that can be financed with the next generation EU funds? Well, if you thought of building daycare centers or care facilities, this is not the main priority for these funds. They could be used for such purpose if there was a justified need, but the trend, as you know, is to deinstitutionalize, to finance technology so that people can stay in their own homes, to provide services at home rather than to invest in bricks. The idea would be that with this type of next generation EU funds, you can finance, for example, an overarching policy and the services that accompany this policy, for example, to support people so that they can stay in their own homes and within their own communities. Other examples of reform in social services that could be funded under the next generation include, for instance, the use of technologies in information systems, for example, the use of data that is hosted by social services to determine trends which are based on the analysis of that data, held in relation to people using services, so that certain situations can be prevented, for example, neglect, harm or abuse of children, or supportive preventative interventions for older people. Other examples can include technological assistance to people in situations of dependency, such as advanced telecare programs, or the idea of promoting accessibility, physical or cognitive accessibility for all people, not just for people with disabilities, but for anybody who need access to, for example, goods, services or technology. And of course, the active inclusion of recipients of minimum income schemes, combining income with access to social support programs and social inclusion programs, similar to the example that Anne referred to in the city of Ghent.